I saw your post on the forum. I want to die too. Let's do it together. Michiko Nagamoto was 25 years old. She had been scrolling through suicide websites for weeks, looking for someone who understood. Someone who wouldn't try to talk her out of it. When the reply came, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Relief. The man on the other end seemed kind. He suggested the method, a charcoal burner in a sealed car. Carbon monoxide. Painless. Peaceful. They exchanged 20 emails. He was patient, reassuring. On February 19th, 2005, Michiko said goodbye to no one and walked out of her apartment in Toyonaka, Osaka. She climbed into a rented car with a man she had never met in person. She believed she was about to end her life with a stranger who shared her pain. She was wrong about everything. The man sitting next to her had no intention of dying that night. He had a different plan entirely. And when the car doors locked, Michiko Nagamoto became the first of three. Osaka, Japan, 2005. A city of neon and narrow alleys. Street food stalls pumping smoke into the humid summer air. The Dotonbori Canal reflecting 1,000 colored lights. But away from the crowds, in the rented cars, in the mountain forests south of the city, in the quiet suburbs where nobody knocks on your door, something else was happening. A man was hunting. And he wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight, on the internet, in the darkest corners where desperate people went to find a way out. His name was Hiroshi Maeue. He was 36 years old, and by the time police finally stopped him, he had spent almost 2 decades rehearsing for exactly what he was about to do. Hiroshi Maeue was born on August 8, 1968, in Osaka Prefecture. On the surface, unremarkable. A quiet child, a student who kept to himself. But Maeue carried something inside him from a very young age, a desire he couldn't explain. A hunger that didn't fit into any normal category. He would later tell psychiatrists that it started with a mystery novel he read as a boy. Something in those pages planted a seed, a connection between death and arousal, between hands around a throat and the most intense feeling he had ever known. By the time he entered the Kanazawa Institute of Technology, the seed had grown. In 1988, he tried to strangle a male friend. He dropped out of university. But dropping out didn't stop the urge. Nothing stopped the urge. 1995. Maeue beat and attempted to asphyxiate a male work colleague. He settled out of court. He was fired. He walked free. 2001. He attempted to strangle 2 women. This time, the courts couldn't ignore it. 1 year in prison, 3 years suspended sentence. He got out early for good behavior, and in 2002, within months of his release, he was arrested again. This time for attempting to strangle a junior high school boy. 22 months in prison. 4 arrests. 4 convictions. 1 decade. And still, nobody understood what they were dealing with. Let me pause here, because this is the part of the story where most people ask the same question. How? How does a man get arrested 4 times for strangulation? 4 separate incidents, 4 different victims, spanning over a decade, and still walk the streets? How does he serve time, get released, and immediately do it again, over and over, without anyone flagging the pattern? The answer tells you something about Japan's criminal justice system in the 1990s and early 2000s. Maeue's crimes were treated as isolated incidents. Assault, battery, not as symptoms of something far more dangerous. Nobody connected the dots because nobody was looking at the dots. The psychiatric evaluations were shallow. The prison sentences were short. The suspended sentences were generous. And Maeue learned something from every arrest. He learned to be smarter. He learned to find victims who wouldn't be missed. He learned that the system would not protect people from him. By the time he walked out of prison in early 2005, he was no longer practicing. He was ready. Japan has a suicide problem. Over 30,000 people take their own lives every year. It's one of the highest rates in the developed world. And in the early 2000s, a strange cultural phenomenon had emerged. Suicide websites. Online forums where strangers connected to form suicide pacts. Groups of 2, 3, sometimes 4 people. They would meet in person, rent a car, seal the windows, light a charcoal stove, and wait for the carbon monoxide to do its work. These pacts were making headlines. They were being debated in the Diet. They were a national crisis. Hiroshi Maeue saw them as an opportunity. He began posting on these websites in early 2005. His messages were carefully crafted, sympathetic, understanding. He claimed he wanted to die. He suggested meeting in person to do it together.
Every single message was a lie. Maeue had no intention of dying. He had a paraphilic disorder, a psychosexual condition that meant he could not achieve sexual release unless he was strangling someone. He needed hands around throats. He needed to watch the light leave someone's eyes. The suicide websites gave him an endless supply of victims who were already planning to disappear. Victim 1, Michiko Nagamoto, 25 years old, February 19th, 2005. Michiko was from Toyonaka, a quiet suburb of Osaka. She had been struggling for months. The suicide forum became her only outlet. When Maeue replied to her post, she believed she had found a partner for her final act. They met for the first time on the day she died. Maeue drove her to a secluded spot. He suggested they talk first. She agreed. He then tied her up inside the car. He He sealed her nose and mouth with his bare hands. He watched her suffocate. Later, he told police, "I wanted to watch a face in agony." He filmed it. Then he drove her body to a mountain forest in Kawachi Nagano, south of Osaka, and buried her by a river. Victim 2, a 14-year-old boy, May 2005. The boy was from Kobe, a junior high school student, still a child. His name was never publicly released. Neither was the name of the third victim. In Japan, the families of victims often fight to keep their loved ones' identities private, especially when suicide is involved. The boy posted on a suicide website. Maeue responded with the same script, the same false empathy, the same promise of a shared death. Instead, Maeue strangled him, dumped his body on a mountain slope in southern Osaka Prefecture, left him there like garbage. Victim 3, a 21-year-old man, June 2005, a university student from Higashi, Osaka, also lured through a suicide website, also promised a painless death alongside a sympathetic stranger, also murdered for Maeue's sexual gratification. His body was left in the mountains. 3 victims, 4 months, February to June 2005, a 25-year-old woman, a 14-year-old boy, a 21-year-old college student. All of them believed they were meeting someone who understood their pain. All of them walked into that car willingly. None of them knew that the man beside them was getting something from their deaths that they could never have imagined. The investigation began with Michiko Nagamoto. Her body was discovered on February 23, 2005, 4 days after her murder, buried along a riverbank in a remote part of Kawachi Nagano. Dental records and fingerprints confirmed her identity. Police traced the emails, 20 messages between Maeue and Nagamoto. Then the car rental contract. The digital footprint led directly to his door. But here's what's devastating. By the time they arrested Maeue on August 5th, 2005, 6 days before his 37th birthday, he had already killed 2 more people. The investigation moved slowly, and while it crawled forward, Maeue kept hunting. When they finally brought him in, he didn't resist. He didn't deny anything. He confessed to all 3 murders. He confessed to the earlier assaults. He told them about the mystery novel, about the paraphilia, about how he filmed the killings so he could relive them later. He described his crimes in clinical detail. No remorse, no tears. Just a man explaining a compulsion he had never tried to control. The trial began at the Osaka District Court in 2007. Prosecutors called Maeue a lust murderer, a term reserved for killers who derive sexual pleasure from the act of killing itself. Not from the victim, not from the power, from the moment life leaves the body. Maeue sat in the courtroom, expressionless, as the evidence was presented. The emails, the car rental receipts, the videos he had made. His defense team argued for leniency. They cited his mental disorder. They filed an appeal. And then something unexpected happened. Maeue withdrew the appeal himself. On July 5th, 2007, he announced that he accepted the death sentence, that he was willing to pay for his crimes with his life. Some saw it as a final act of control. Others saw it as the only honest thing he ever did. On March 28, 2007, the Osaka District Court sentenced Hiroshi Maeue to death by hanging. On July 28, 2009, just over 2 years later, he was executed at the Osaka Detention House. He was 40 years old. That same day, Japan also executed Yukio Yamaji, a 25-year-old serial killer who had murdered a mother and her 2 children in Kyoto. 2 executions. One day. A country drawing lines in the sand. Here's what stays with me about the Hiroshi Maeue case. It's not just the murders, it's the 17-year runway. From 1988, the first strangulation attempt in university, to 2005, the final murder. 17 years of escalating violence, 4 arrests, 3 prison sentences, dozens of warning signs, and at every single checkpoint, the system let him through. The friend he strangled in 1988 didn't report it seriously. The colleague he attacked in 1995 settled out of court. The 2 women in 2001, a suspended sentence. The junior high school boy in 2002, less than 2 years inside. Nobody asked the obvious question, what happens when this man gets out? Maeue answered that question himself in 2005. 3 people died because nobody had asked it soon enough. And then there are the suicide websites, the forums that connected desperate people to a predator, the digital spaces where Maeue found his victims, not by force, not by stalking, but by offering them exactly what they thought they wanted. He didn't need to break down a door. He knocked, and they opened it. The Hiroshi Maeue case isn't just a serial killer story. It's a story about what happens when a society fails to see a pattern that's been unfolding in plain sight for almost 2 decades. 3 people walked into a car believing they had found someone who understood their darkest thoughts. Instead, they found Hiroshi Maeue, and he understood something about them that they never saw coming.